Hi class, and welcome to our first theory lesson. I thought first of all we better start off by just discussing why we study music theory and what's the point in doing this. Why can't we just go and do our practical lessons all the time and just practice on our instruments? Why do we have to stop and actually consider what's happening theoretically? And I guess firstly in answering that question is we need to understand how music works and why things happen, so that we can understand what composers are doing, how the music's made up, and why certain notes are in certain places, why certain notes work together and why others don't. And once we can understand those sorts of things, we can start to write music a little more intentionally, and we get a bit more control over what we're doing. Now secondly, it's really important to develop a common language between musicians so that we can discuss things with each other when we're rehearsing and working together, and that we can understand each other. So developing a common language and understanding what's going on is really important. So next, what is music? Well, I think music's best described as sounds all happening in an intentional sequence. So it can be any variety of sounds that the composer chooses, but it's got to be arranged in an intentional sort of way. So it's really quite a broad definition, and I guess under that definition music includes a lot of different soundscapes that perhaps you wouldn't have considered being music before, but that's my belief around music, and yours might be a little different. So I'd encourage you to think for yourself about what you think music is or isn't, and you can discuss that on the forum on our website. So how can we communicate? So if we're thinking about sounds being an intentional sequence, we'll just replace sounds with notes. So let's talk about notes in an intentional sequence. So if we're working with notes, we're talking about pitch and duration. Now there are a couple of terms that may be new to you. By pitch, we're talking about how high a sound is. So a high pitch would be la, 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 up there, and a low pitch would be la, 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 down there. So we're talking about how high or how low a note is. Duration, we're talking about the length of a note. That can be really long or it can be very short. So there's your pitch and duration. Now if we take a look at this example I've included below called Fabric, it's a rather complicated looking piece, but we can see here that we've got a variety of pitches happening, and basically it's a bit like a graph. So the higher the note is up this way, the higher the pitch is, and the lower the note is down toward the bottom, the lower the pitch is. So that's fairly simple. So you've got all your high sounds happening up here, and you've got all your low sounds down here. Now, as goes duration, that's kind of like the x-axis of the graph. So as you travel along this way, that's time. So the piece of music happens as we travel along, and some notes are long and some are short. And in this example, we've got a lot of really short notes. You can see there's a lot of notes included here, and they're happening quite quickly. So moving on. Music happens on stave lines, where we communicate music usually through using stave lines like this, and we can talk about stave lines in terms of numbers. So we can number them, the first line being at the bottom, and there's usually 5 lines we work with, and the 5th line being at the top. Now the spaces we use as well, just as equally as we use the lines, and so we talk about the spaces the same way. The first space is at the bottom, second space, third space, fourth space, going up like that. Now if we run out of lines and spaces, we can add extra lines above or below, and we call those ledger lines. And you can see here, the further we go up the ledger lines, the higher the note is. The further we go down, the lower the note is. Now to make sense of the ledger lines, we add in things called clefs. And this fella here, you might have seen again and again to do with music. This is called a treble clef. And the treble clef is otherwise known as a G clef. And you might be able to see, if you use your imagination, some similarities between the treble clef and the letter G. And it's believed in times gone by that it was originally a G and had a little more resemblance than what it does today to our modern letter G. So that's the G clef. Now why is it called G clef? Because what it's doing is it's targeting this line here, the second line. And what it's trying to tell us is that second line is, in fact, a G. And so everything refers to that being G. Okay, now if we go up and start at the bottom line down here and go line, space, line, space, line, space, line, space, line, all the way up, okay, and everything's referring to this being G, we can actually count our way up through the alphabet. Now, something I need to mention at this point probably is that our musical alphabet starts at A and it goes through till you get to G, and then it actually starts at A again. So we stop at G and then start at A, and it cycles through again and again and again and again, over and over. So starting at A, ending at G. So in fact, the note after G would be A. And then on the next line up would be B, and then C in the space, D on the line, E in the space, F on the line, G in the space above that. Now we could add a ledger line above that and put an A on it if we wanted to. And then put a B in the space above that, another ledger line, and have a C, etc., etc. Now if we go back down to the bottom, before the G would come F, before the F comes E, before the E comes D, and on the ledger line below we would have a C. Alright, so that's the alphabetical way of working things out. If you get along better with rhymes and words and that sort of thing to try and work things out, then there's a couple of nice little rhymes you can use. Firstly, if we look at the notes in the space, we might notice that they spell out the word face, F-A-C-E. And so if you can remember face in the space, then that's probably a nice way for you to be able to work those space notes out. Otherwise, a rhyme for the lines: every good boy deserves fruit. And I know there's a bunch of other rhymes you can find online. I think that one's a nice, easy one to remember, but you can probably find your own rhymes or make up your own to be able to remember that. But every good boy deserves fruit is the way that I learnt that. Let's have a look at another clef. This is a bass clef. The bass clef, similar to the treble clef, just points out a particular line and gives us a reference point. So if we take a look at the the bass clef, it's also known as an F clef. Now, I'm not sure how that symbol looks like an F at all. I don't think it does, but what it's doing is highlighting this line here, which is our 1, 2, 3, fourth line up. The fourth line is F, and everything else is in reference to that. So if we work it out the same way, going line, space, line, and using our musical alphabet, we can work that one out. So with this note being F, if we go to the space above that, it's going to be G. And the line above that will be A. That's right. So after G comes A, and then in the space above that would be B, and we can put a ledger line above, and that ledger line will be C. My ledger line's a bit messy. I'll draw that again. There we go. Now going down below F would be E, on the line would be D, in the space is C, on the lines B, in the space is A, and then below the A comes G. Alright. Now, again we can have some rhymes to work this one out. A, C, E, G is the spaces. I remember that by this rhyme, all cows eat grass. It's not really a rhyme, it's a, I don't know what it is, but probably not a rhyme. Now, as for the lines, great big ducks fly away. I think that's a nice one to remember. So all cows eat grass for the spaces, and great big ducks fly away for the lines. Now what happens when we put the treble clef and the bass clef together? We get something called the grand stave, and they're usually connected by this device here called a brace. So the brace just lets us know that the treble clef and the bass clef should be played at the same time, and they connect up at middle C, which is the first ledger line below the treble clef and the first ledger line above the bass clef, and they're both the same note. Now if we're going to find these notes on a piano, that note that connects our two staves, the first ledger line below the treble clef and the first ledger line above the bass clef, are the same note, and they refer to this note on the piano, which is called middle C. Where do you find middle C? Well, it's in the middle of the piano pretty much. If you find two black notes on the piano, like this, group of two black notes, and then go to the left of that, left hand side, first white note is always C. So it's fairly easy to work out where C is on your piano. Drop my pen. So you can see here, 2 black notes to the left, it's middle C. 2 black notes here to the left, it's C. 2 black notes to the left, it's C. And the C in the middle of the piano is called middle C and refers to this position on the staves. Okay, you can see as we go up the piano we get C, D, E, F, G, starting at A again over here, and they refer to these notes on the stave. So you can see it's going line, space, line, space, line, space, line, all the way up and going up the piano keyboard, and then you know, going backward from C down the keyboard like that. So when we talk about there being lots of C's on the keyboard, okay, starting at middle C, there's a C above that, there's a C below that, and there's lots of other C's. The keyboard is arranged into octaves. Now it's called an octave because just like an octopus has 8 legs, the octave has 8 notes. So you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes, 8 white notes anyway. If you include the black notes, we've actually got 12 notes in the octave, but we can concentrate on the white notes for now. Right, now it's time to test your knowledge of the staves and do a little bit of practice around that. So I've included some worksheets for you on the site which you'll have to download and complete. So to complete these worksheets, here's the first one. It just works with the treble stave. What you need to do is just name the notes on the stave. And you can see above there's included a reminder about the note names. And if you go through and name these notes, you'll find that they'll spell words. So that's a nice way to be able to check your answers. If it doesn't spell a word, chances are you've got the answer wrong. So go through and complete that one, please. And then after that one, you've got the same sort of deal, except with the bass clef, just to give you a bit of practice at your bass clef as well. All right, good luck, and please ask questions if you need help.